Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 72 of Buha's Block. On today's episode, we're going to be doing a Lakers trade primer. I'm going to be discussing my article from The Athletic that just dropped this morning, going through various trade topics and questions regarding the Lakers and my understanding and reporting on said topics and questions. So let's dive into it. But before we do, you guys know the drill. As always, for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. All right, so trade season is here. Trade season officially started on December 15th. That is when many of the players that were signed over the offseason became eligible to be traded, including LeBron James, who became eligible to be traded on December 15th, though he is one of two players in the NBA, along with Bradley Beal, who has a no trade clause. So LeBron is in charge of his future. So December 15th kicked off trade season, and we've already seen a couple of trades. Thomas Bryant was traded from the Miami Heat to the Indiana Pacers, and Dennis Schroeder was traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the Golden State Warriors. In both cases, you had playoff hopefuls who were decimated with injuries and trying to shore up positions of need. And I could think of one team that has been decimated by injuries and has a position of need that they need shoring up. That is also a playoff hopeful. I think there's a team in Los Angeles that checks that box. So taking stock of the Lakers currently, they are 14-12, 9th in the Western Conference, technically 10th, but they're tied for 9th with the Clippers from a record perspective. And they're 22nd in net rating, though. So clearly, from a statistical point differential net rating perspective, they've been a bottom 10 team this season. And it's clear that they have multiple holes on this roster that they need to upgrade. And if we are to take what Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick said seriously at Media Day, and that this group has championship aspirations, and that Pelinka plans on reassessing the group, reevaluating them around the 30-game mark, which is at Christmas, that it's clear they need to make some moves to upgrade this roster, and it is likely going to require some draft capital because the Lakers were active at the 2024 trade deadline, and they were active over the summer in terms of trying to make moves, but they ultimately did not make any. And as it showed, activity does not necessarily lead to action with the Lakers. And I think the biggest sticking point for them has been using their draft capital, specifically the first round picks. And it seems like it's probably time to put those on the table and potentially use them depending on the deal. So let's get into our trade primer. I have a series of topics and questions that I'm going to be going through. So let's get into it. The first question for me is, are the Lakers likely to make a move? And this is the most important question. It has been the most asked question for me on here during my live streams, in the comment section, on social media. This is the question on every Laker fan's mind. And my understanding is yes, at least that is the operating assumption around the league, that the Lakers are going to make a move during this trade cycle. The question is, how big of a move are they going to make? And that is where there's less clarity. Is it a smaller deal to clear up a roster spot or to add some depth? Is it a medium-sized move to add maybe a Jonas Valanciunas? Is it a bigger move? Are they putting both picks on the table for a player, or a couple separate moves that combine to make a bigger move, a bigger reshuffling, restructuring of the roster, of the hierarchy, etc. So that is not as clear. And it's also worth noting that when I reported and wrote this story about a year ago, it was a little bit deeper, like more mid-January. The operating assumption around the league was that the Lakers were going to make a move then. So just because people around the league think the Lakers are going to make a move, it doesn't mean they're going to. And dating back to last season, the most popular move that they were attached to was DeJounte Murray from the Hawks, or then with the Hawks. And the sticking point for the Lakers was Austin Reeves and his inclusion in that deal. They were trying to trade D'Angelo Russell and a pick or potentially 2 picks to get DeJounte Murray, but Atlanta really wanted Austin Reeves, as I've previously reported on at The Athletic. So just because the Lakers are attached to a player or expected to make a move, it does not mean they are going to. But one thing that is hanging over all of this is that Rob Pelinka said publicly that he wanted to reevaluate this group around the 30-game mark, and we're about to hit it. It's on Christmas, so that is next Wednesday in Golden State will mark the 30th game of the Lakers season. Like, where are the Lakers in the standings? What is this group looking like? Because as I mentioned, they're currently 10th in the West, tied for 9th, but 10th technically, and they're 22nd in net rating. And they've lost 8 of 12 games. The season has been trending in the wrong direction. Now, they've won 2 of their past 3 games. I think the Memphis game was one of their best wins of the season, probably their best win since the opening homestand. So maybe the Lakers can right the ship here a bit. And they have a couple of important games coming up in Sacramento. We'll see how those go. We'll see how the Christmas matchup goes. But depending on how the next couple of weeks go, that could also have a say in terms of the magnitude of the move that the Lakers front office ultimately decides on. And the final thing here with this topic is right now there are more buyers than sellers. If you look at the teams that are currently tanking for Cooper Flag or just the teams that are looking more toward the future, you could only come up with about 5, 6, maybe 7 teams tops. And that means that there's another 23 to 25 teams who are either going for it or at least not looking to sell their players. And that creates a scenario where the asking price for some of these guys could end up being a little bit higher. Now, I will say that the Dennis Schroeder trade with Golden State potentially lowered the market, where maybe you see guys start to go for 2 or 3 second-round picks instead of a first-round pick. And that, there were people I talked to that were surprised by the final cost for Dennis Schroeder and that they felt like it probably should have been a first round pick. And the fact that it wasn't a first round pick ultimately means that maybe we see role players move for cheaper prices than anticipated. That would obviously be a good thing for the Lakers if they can get some difference makers without giving up a first round pick, or maybe they get a better than anticipated difference maker with a first round pick. Maybe a guy that you would expect to go for a couple of first round picks, or maybe a first round pick plus something else. So from that perspective, the early returns on the trade market have been positive for teams like the Lakers, but there is going to be a lot of demand. And with the Lakers looking for 3-and-D wings and big men, those are 2 of the most valuable positions in the league right now. Those are 2 positions and player archetypes that basically every team could use more of. So that there is a chance that depending on who is actually available and who the Lakers are interested in, some of those prices rise a little bit higher the longer the Lakers wait and the more there's a bit of a bidding war. So there's a delicate balance here in terms of being patient, and maybe some of the prices drop if you wait closer to the trade deadline and there's a little bit more desperation from some of the other teams to just get a deal done and get something back for some of these guys. At the same time, there could also be a bidding war. So it is going to be interesting to see how LA handles that calculation and when they ultimately decide to pull the trigger on making a move. All right, so the second question is, who are realistic trade targets? And similar to last season, the Lakers have identified 3 current roster needs, which are a big, physical, bruising, defensive-minded center, a 3-and-D wing that could start and close next to LeBron and AD, and a big, quick, athletic guard with point of attack capabilities. So these are 3 of the needs that the Lakers had identified last season as well. I wrote and reported something similar in terms of the internal needs and what they felt like could really balance out the group and elevate it. Now, it's going to be difficult to check all 3 boxes. I think checking 2 of the 3 boxes is probably most realistic. And on top of that, the other challenge is going to be not creating other holes in the roster. So for example, if they trade D'Angelo Russell for a big man or for a 3-and-D wing, and let's even say they do a couple deals and it's D'Angelo Russell and Gabe Vincent, now all of a sudden you don't have the same level of ball handling and playmaking at the point guard position behind LeBron and behind Austin Reeves. So I think the challenge here for the Lakers is addressing at least a couple of these needs without creating other holes or needs within the roster, right? So it's striking that balance of, can we take from places within the roster or the rotation that we can afford to lose, either it's someone out of the rotation or it's a replaceable part of the rotation, and can we just enhance the roster without taking away from too much of it? So that is the task moving forward over the next 6 to 7 weeks or so as the Lakers figure this out. As for specific names, of course, Jonas Valanciunas has been the player that has been most attached to the Lakers in league circles dating back to last season. He was on LeBron James's list of players that he would take a pay cut for. I was a bit surprised by that, but he was on that list, which signifies how highly LeBron thought of him over the summer. JJ Redick, a couple weeks later, in an interview at Summer League, mentioned the need for a big, bruising big man, which seemed to be describing Valanciunas' archetype. And then AD has long wanted a better frontline partner at the center position next to him. And I think Valanciunas would qualify, at least in comparison to Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood. So there's been a lot of Valanciunas buzz. I will note that when the Lakers are attached to a player and it gets this loud, it has rarely actually happened. So I would not be surprised if Valanciunas gets traded elsewhere, and maybe this is a bit of a smokescreen or something. At the same time, given LeBron's interest in him, given the potential asking price that could be something like Gabe Vincent and a couple seconds, 2 to 3 second round picks, I think that's a realistic trade for the Lakers. And if LeBron wants it, if AD wants it, if there's not too much of a bidding war, I think that is a realistic potential trade for the Lakers, especially in the short term. The other two names that have been attached to the Lakers recently and really for months, and even in one player's case for years, are Nets wings Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith. Now, Dorian Finney-Smith is someone they've had interest in dating back to Dallas, but through Dallas and Brooklyn, he's been a name that has been attached to the Lakers. Cam Johnson a bit more recently, but with the Nets pivoting, almost overachieving to start the season, and then feeling like they had to dismantle the roster, trading away Dennis Schroeder, and now Johnson and Finney-Smith are expected to be available. It seems like the Nets are trying to make sure they're not too good, they're not in the play-in mix, and they are trying to get the best draft position possible. With the Nets looking to be sellers, I think Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith, I think both guys could help. I think you can make a case in either direction. Of course, Cam Johnson's having a career year. He, I think, in my opinion, is the better player. From what I've heard, will cost more than Finney-Smith. But in either direction, Finney-Smith is more of that 3-and-D wing that the Lakers need. Cam Johnson is a high-level shooter. I think a guy that would fit well next to LeBron and AD from an offensive perspective. He's big, he's athletic. So either way, I think both guys check a lot of the boxes of what the Lakers would need. And with the Schroeder price being 3 second-round picks, potentially both guys will end up going for a bit cheaper than expected, based on, again, sort of the initial reporting, the initial asking prices for what Brooklyn wanted. As for other guys that have been linked to the Lakers in conversations with league personnel, Utah's Walker Kessler and Colin Sexton, Washington's Kyle Kuzma, Portland's Jeremy Grant, and Robert Williams III, and Toronto's Bruce Brown Jr. Those are all names I've heard linked to the Lakers in the past several weeks, talking to people around the league and within the team in terms of potential trade targets, potential guys that could be available that the Lakers would be interested in. It is seeming unlikely that the Lakers are going to throw their hat in the ring for a star like a Jimmy Butler, a Brandon Ingram, a Zach LaVine. From my understanding, all three of those guys are unlikely to end up being Lakers. And then a couple of notes to close out this question. One, as I've reported for a long time, the Lakers have wanted to get to that 30-game mark and evaluate the roster. They have been dealing with some season-long injuries with Jared Vanderbilt and Christian Wood. They are optimistic that depending on when those guys can return, they can potentially plug some of the holes, maybe the big man hole, maybe the wing hole, or at least one of the wing holes on the team in Vando's case. So I think depending on when those guys return and how those guys look, if they return before the Lakers make a trade or before at least the trade deadline, then maybe they change course in terms of their potential needs. And then the second note, I think arguably the most important note of this entire episode, is the Lakers move covertly. And we've seen, again, there'll be a lot of noise, a lot of guys attached to them. Then maybe a trade doesn't happen, or they make a trade for someone else. They trade a player we weren't expecting. They trade for a player we weren't expecting. So while there has been a lot of noise with Valanciunas in particular, to a lesser extent, the Nets wings, and it seems like if they make a short-term move or a move within the next couple days or a couple weeks, it would probably be Valanciunas or one of the Nets wings. In the longer term picture, I would not be surprised if the Lakers make a move for a player or with a team that no one sees coming. So I think that can't be ruled out. And we now have a history with this front office and with the last few trade deadlines of things not always playing out the way that they are reported on. And I acknowledge that I am reporting on a bunch of this stuff and that it could not play out the way I'm saying it, but I feel like it is my duty as a reporter, as a Lakers beat writer, to share what I'm hearing. And I also think, like, knowing what the team is looking for, and from a positional standpoint, like maybe the players don't end up being the players that they trade for, but knowing what they're looking for, I think that is tended to be accurate. It's more so, are they willing to give up the draft capital? So that is tended to be less clear. That's why I'm focusing more so on that rather than some of the specific names. Next question is, which Lakers are eligible to be traded? And the answer is the entire 15-man roster is eligible to be traded. LeBron can be traded as of December 15th. As I previously mentioned, he has a no trade clause, so he is in charge of his future. And Max Christie will be eligible to be traded on January 15th. Otherwise, the rest of the roster had no trade restrictions and is eligible to be traded immediately. Next question is, are any players untouchable? And there are two players that almost certainly will not be traded, barring them asking out of Los Angeles, and that is Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Despite the recent groundswell from certain media members and fans to blow it all up and trade LeBron and AD, team and league sources have indicated to me that the Lakers are not currently shopping LeBron and AD. They're not interested in trying to trade LeBron and AD and seeing what they could get back for them. They're trying to improve this roster and improve the supporting cast around them and go for it. Now, again, the magnitude of that and how they view that and how much draft capital they're willing to invest, that remains to be seen. Of course, Bronny James will not be included in any trade that does not include LeBron. And then there continues to be a high bar for the Lakers to move Austin Reeves, given his importance as the team's third option offensively and his team-friendly deal. He's making $13 million this year, $14 million next season, and then will likely opt out in the summer of 2026. Similarly, Dalton Connect and Max Christie are two guys in their early 20s that they are prioritizing keeping for the current group and the future iteration of the Lakers. So outside of not trading AD, LeBron, and Bronny, the next three guys that they are going to prioritize keeping and have a high bar for moving are Austin, Dalton, and Max. Naturally, the next question is, which players are likely to be traded? So the Lakers have 4 medium-sized contracts that will be the foundation of any deal involving double-digit outgoing salary, and that is D'Angelo Russell at about $18.7 million, Rui Hachimura at $17 million, Gabe Vincent at $11 million, and Jared Vanderbilt at about $10.7 million. And then quickly on each of those guys, Lakers have spoken highly of Rui Hachimura dating back to the summer and have talked about him as a core piece. So I think among this group, Rui is the guy that is the least likely to be traded and the guy that they'd like to keep the most longer term. D'Lo is a guy they tried to trade at the 2024 trade deadline and over the offseason, but were unable to find any suitors. Gabe Vincent has underwhelmed overall during his tenure, but especially offensively. And I think that's a name that is on the more likely end to be traded among this group. And then Jared Vanderbilt is currently out with knee effusion after having offseason surgeries on both of his feet and missing the season up to this point, and likely being out until at least early January, if not potentially longer. So that would be another name that the Lakers would likely look to move among this group. Then rest of the group, Jalen Hood-Schifino, they did not pick up the third-year option on, which is rare for a player taken that high in the draft, the number 17 pick in the 2023 draft. So Lakers have publicly said they have not given up on JHS, but they obviously did not believe in him enough to give him a third-year option. So that effectively makes him an expiring contract and a potential low-risk gamble for some team to take on a young point guard. So maybe he's a guy that's thrown in a trade or even dealt individually. Like one of my favorite trades is JHS and an unprotected first-round pick for Walker Kessler from Utah. I think that's something that the Jazz would consider. They have had a high asking price for Kessler, so maybe the Lakers have to throw in a second-round pick, a couple seconds to make that work. But I think that's a trade that you're not taking away from the core of the team. You're not taking away from the rotation, and you are adding a 23-year-old center who could be a starting or elite level backup for the foreseeable future. And then finally, Lakers could also throw in a Christian Wood, a Cam Reddish, a Maxwell Lewis as like matching salary. Those guys are all making $3 million or less. So if they need matching salary in a bigger trade, or they just want to clear a roster spot to sign somebody off the buyout market, or there's a free agent that's impressed them, they could also attach a second or something to one of those guys and clear a roster spot. Now, technically, they could have done that over the offseason, and they chose not to. So a little bit more skeptical that they end up doing that. But I think more realistically would be throwing one of those guys into a bigger deal to salary match. And that's a big thing under the new CBA. And so what will teams want from the Lakers? And the answer to that is the same thing they have wanted from the Lakers for over a year now, and that's Austin Reeves and their first-round picks. And the Lakers have access to 3 first-round picks that they can trade: 2029, 2030, and 2031. So they could trade any of those picks individually. Now, if they want to trade 2 first-round picks, it would have to be the 2029 and the 2031 due to the Stepien rule. So they could not, in that case, trade the 2030 pick. But they have multiple pick swaps that they could do. They could, let's say they're putting 2029 and 2031 on the table. They could also do pick swaps with 2026, 2028, and 2030 in that case. They also have 5 second-round picks, including the Clippers 2025 second-round pick. So that's 3 pick swaps and 5 second-round picks to play with, in addition to up to 2 tradable first-round picks. Connect and Christie will be 2 younger guys that teams will ask for as throw-ins or to entice to make a deal. I'm sure some teams will sniff around the prices for LeBron and AD, see if they can blow the Lakers away with a Godfather type offer to try and get them to blow up the blow up the roster and trade those guys. But again, as I previously mentioned and reporting, I've heard that the Lakers are not currently considering that and are only looking to upgrade the roster. And finally, what are the Lakers' financial and roster constraints? So the Lakers have a full roster with 15 players with guaranteed contracts. That means they cannot take back an additional player in any potential trade. Now, the caveat with that is, of course, they could do an initial move, or maybe they do a 2-for-1, a 3-for-1, a 3-for-2, whatever, shed a contract or two, in which case, in a separate deal, they could then take back an additional player to get them back to 14 or 15 players. And one note is, if they dip below 14 players, which is the league minimum, they will have 2 weeks to get back up to 14. So they could sign a free agent, they could convert one of the two-way guys into a roster spot, but they would have 2 weeks in that scenario. And then from a financial perspective, because of where they are, they're about, depending on the cap estimation that you look at, that they're somewhere between 30 to 45,000 under the second apron. So not a lot of wiggle room. And Lakers are currently restricted at the first apron in terms of taking back more salary than they send out. So any trade the Lakers make, it has to be matching salary to the dollar amount, if not LA sending out more money. And that's something to keep in consideration. And the final note is the Lakers will not be going above the second apron. So let's just say they trade Maxwell Lewis or Cam Reddish, and they are going to sign a vet minimum player who is making more based on years of service. Let's say it's a veteran guy, and that player would be making more, enough to offset that, it's a prorated amount, but enough to offset that 30 to 45K difference. And that would tilt the Lakers into the second apron. That is a non-starter. So, it makes sense because the second apron restrictions are very punitive. The league really incentivizes you to not go into the second apron. There's all these other factors and complications that come with being in the second apron in terms of making moves and signing guys. So the Lakers will not be going into the second apron. But I hope this was a helpful trade primer. I tried to answer every theoretical big picture question. This is similar to the story I wrote on The Athletic. So you can read that on The Athletic if you are subscribed to it. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. But that'll do it for today's show. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Barring the Lakers making a trade over the next 48 hours or some breaking news happening, I'll be back Thursday night after the Lakers-Kings game. I will talk to you then.